Victoria Monroe stood in front of the tall glass doors of Lumina Arts Gallery, her reflection clear against the polished surface. She adjusted the collar of her navy blue suit one last time before stepping inside. The gallery was known for hosting some of the most exclusive art events in New York City, and tonight's exhibition promised to showcase works from both emerging and established artists. Victoria had been looking forward to this evening for weeks. As a successful businesswoman and avid collector, she loved exploring new pieces that could add depth to her growing collection. The moment she entered, the soft hum of conversation filled the air. People milled about, sipping champagne and admiring paintings displayed on pristine white walls. The lighting was perfect, just bright enough to highlight the colors of each artwork without overwhelming them. Victoria felt a familiar thrill as she moved through the space, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Art always made her feel alive, like she was part of something bigger than herself. But almost immediately, Victoria noticed something off. A few of the gallery employees seemed uneasy when they saw her. It wasn't obvious at first, just small things. A glance exchanged between two staff members, a forced smile from a woman holding a tray of drinks. At first, Victoria told herself she might be imagining it. After all, she was used to being in places where people didn't expect to see someone like her. A black woman dressed in designer clothes, confident and poised. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She stopped near a large abstract painting, its bold reds and blacks drawing her attention. Just as she leaned closer to read the description card, a young man approached her. His name tag read Greg, and he carried himself with an air of superiority that grated on Victoria instantly. "Can I help you?" Greg asked, his tone polite but distant. He glanced down at her outfit briefly before meeting her eyes again. "Yes, thank you," Victoria replied smoothly, ignoring the slight edge in his voice. "I was wondering if you could tell me more about this piece." Greg hesitated for a second too long before answering. "Oh, sure. This is called Eclipsing Shadows. It's by one of our newer artists. Very intense, wouldn't you say?" Victoria nodded, her expression neutral. "It's striking. I'd love to know more about the artist's background." "Well, he's European," Greg said quickly, as if that explained everything. Then after a pause, he added, "You know, this style might not really appeal to everyone. If you're interested, we have some other pieces that are simpler." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Simpler. Victoria clenched her jaw but kept her composure. She knew exactly what Greg meant, that her taste or understanding of art somehow needed to be simplified because of who she was. But instead of arguing, she simply smiled. "Thank you for your suggestion," she said coolly. "I'll take a look around." As Greg walked away, Victoria exhaled slowly, trying to push aside the sting of his words. She reminded herself why she was here, to enjoy the art, not to let rude comments ruin her night. Still, the encounter left a sour taste in her mouth. Moving further into the gallery, Victoria found herself near a group of employees chatting quietly among themselves. One of them, a blonde woman named Rachel, caught her eye. Rachel was laughing, with another coworker, pointing toward a sculpture across the room. When she noticed Victoria looking their way, her laughter faltered slightly, and she turned to whisper something to her friend. Though Victoria couldn't hear what was said, she saw the way Rachel glanced at her and then back at her companion, her lips curling into a smirk. Feeling a flush of embarrassment creep up her neck, Victoria looked away. She reminded herself that these people didn't matter. They were just petty individuals who couldn't see past their own biases. But deep down, the weight of their judgment pressed heavily on her. It wasn't the first time she'd faced racism or disrespect, but it never got easier. Each instance chipped away at her patience, even though she tried so hard to rise above it. Determined not to let their behavior affect her, Victoria continued exploring the gallery. She paused in front of a series of photographs depicting urban life, their stark contrasts capturing moments of beauty amidst chaos. For a brief moment, she lost herself in the images, letting the noise of the crowd fade into the background. These were the kinds of pieces she loved. art that told stories that reflected real emotions and experiences. Her peace was short-lived, however. As she reached for a brochure detailing the exhibit, she heard a low murmur behind her. Turning slightly, she saw Rachel and her co-worker standing nearby, pretending to examine a nearby painting while clearly talking about her. Their voices were hushed, but Victoria's sharp hearing picked up fragments of their conversation. "Looks like she thinks she belongs here," Rachel whispered, her tone dripping with disdain. "I know, right? Did you see what she's wearing?" "Totally out of place," her co-worker replied, smirking. Victoria froze, her fingers tightening around the brochure. She wanted to turn around and confront them, to demand an explanation for their rudeness. But she stopped herself. Arguing with people like them would only give them power over her, and she refused to let them win. Instead, she took a deep breath and focused on calming the anger bubbling inside her. Deciding to ignore them, Victoria wandered toward a quieter section of the gallery. There, she found solace in a small alcove featuring a single painting, a serene landscape bathed in golden light. The piece radiated warmth, and for a moment Victoria felt a sense of peace wash over her. She imagined standing in that field, feeling the gentle breeze and hearing birdsong. It was a reminder of why she loved art so much. It transported her to places far removed from the ugliness of the world. Still, the earlier incidents lingered in her mind. She thought about how often she encountered similar situations, not just in galleries but in boardrooms, restaurants, and social gatherings. No matter how much money she earned or how many accolades she received, there were always people who judged her based on the color of her skin. It was exhausting, fighting constantly to prove herself in spaces that weren't designed for people like her. As the evening wore on, Victoria decided to leave early. She had seen enough art to satisfy her curiosity, and the tension caused by Greg and Rachel's behavior had drained her energy. On her way out, she passed by a mirror hanging in the hallway. Pausing for a moment, she studied her reflection. Her dark hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and her suit impeccable. She looked every bit the successful, confident woman she was. Yet none of that mattered to people like Greg and Rachel. To them, she would always be less. Stepping outside into the cool night air, Victoria felt a mix of frustration and determination. She knew she deserved better than to be treated with such disrespect, and as she hailed a cab and climbed inside, she resolved to do something about it, not just for herself, but for others who faced the same kind of prejudice. The night may have ended on a sour note, but Victoria wasn't about to let it defeat her. If anything, it fueled her desire to create change, starting with exposing the truth about places like Lumina Arts Gallery. The cab pulled away from the curb, leaving the glittering facade of the gallery behind. Victoria stared out the window, watching the city lights blur together as the vehicle sped through the streets. She didn't know yet how she would fight back, but one thing was certain: she wouldn't stay silent. The cab ride home gave Victoria time to think. She stared out the window, her mind replaying the events of the evening at Lumina Arts Gallery. The dismissive comments from Greg, the whispered insults from Rachel and her co-worker. It all felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. But beneath the frustration and hurt, there was also a spark of anger. Not the kind of anger that burned hot and reckless, but a slow, steady flame that fueled her resolve. She had faced racism before, but this time it felt different. This time she decided she wasn't going to let it slide. When the cab pulled up in front of her apartment building, Victoria stepped out and walked briskly to the elevator. Her heels clicked against the marble floor of the lobby, and she nodded politely at the doorman as she passed. Once inside her apartment, she kicked off her shoes and set her bag down on the kitchen counter. The spacious living room was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator in the adjacent kitchen. Victoria poured herself a glass of red wine and sat down on the couch, staring at the city lights twinkling outside her floor-to-ceiling windows. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Marcus, her close friend and attorney. They often checked in with each other after big events like gallery openings or business meetings. Marcus knew how much art meant to Victoria, and he always encouraged her to share her experiences. Tonight, however, Victoria hesitated before replying. She didn't want to burden him with her frustrations, but at the same time, she needed someone to talk to. Finally, she picked up her phone and typed a short message. "Can we meet tomorrow? I need to talk." Marcus responded almost immediately. "Of course, breakfast at your usual spot?" Victoria smiled faintly. Marcus always seemed to know exactly what she needed. "Perfect. Thanks." The next morning, Victoria met Marcus at a cozy cafe near her apartment. The place was warm and inviting, with the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. They chose a corner table away from the crowd, where they could talk privately. Marcus was already sipping his latte when Victoria arrived, dressed casually, in jeans and a sweater. He looked up and greeted her with a warm smile. "You look like you've got something on your mind," Marcus said, setting his cup down. "What's going on?" Victoria sighed and took a sip of her tea before launching into the story of her experience at the gallery. She recounted every detail, the condescending remarks from Greg, the whispered insults from Rachel, and the overall feeling of being treated as if she didn't belong. As she spoke, Marcus listened intently, his expression growing darker with each word. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," Marcus said when she finished. "It's infuriating. People like them don't deserve to work in a place that claims to celebrate creativity and diversity." Victoria nodded, her jaw tightening. "I know, and honestly, part of me wants to sue them, make them pay for treating me like that. But? Marcus prompted. "But I feel like suing them wouldn't be enough," Victoria admitted. "They'd probably just settle out of court, issue some fake apology and move on like nothing happened. That's not justice. I want to expose them, to show everyone who they really are." Marcus leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers thoughtfully against the edge of his coffee cup. "You're talking about taking them down publicly," he said slowly. "That's a bold move, but it could work. If you play your cards right, you could turn this whole situation into something bigger than just revenge. You could make a statement." Victoria's eyes lit up. "Exactly. I don't just want to punish them for what they did to me. I want to shine a light on their behavior, on the way they treat people of color, women, anyone who doesn't fit their narrow idea of what an art collector should look like. And I want to do it in a way that forces them to confront their own hypocrisy." Marcus nodded, impressed by her determination. "Okay, let's think this through. How do you plan to gather evidence? Because without proof, it'll just come down to your word against theirs." "That's where I need your help," Victoria said. "I was thinking, what if I went undercover, created a fake identity, posed as someone else, and documented everything?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Undercover? That's risky. But if anyone can pull it off, it's you." Victoria grinned despite herself. "I know it's a long shot, but I think it could work. Imagine their faces when they realize they've been caught in their own web of lies." "All right," Marcus said, leaning forward. "Let's start planning. First, we'll need to create a convincing alias, someone who fits their idea of a perfect client, a wealthy white woman, maybe even with a fake European accent. We'll handle the legal side of things too, just in case anything goes wrong." Over the next hour, they hashed out the details of Victoria's plan. They decided to call her alter ego Ava Carter, a reclusive heiress with a passion for modern art. Marcus offered to help forge documents and set up fake social media profiles to make Ava seem real. He also suggested bringing in someone trustworthy to document everything discreetly, like a journalist or photographer. "What about Mia?" Marcus asked suddenly. "She's young, ambitious, and good at staying under the radar. Plus she owes you a favor." Victoria thought for a moment. Mia was a freelance journalist who had interviewed her once for a feature on successful Black entrepreneurs. She was sharp and resourceful, exactly the kind of person Victoria needed for this mission. "You're right," she said finally. "Mia would be perfect." Later that day, Victoria called Mia and explained the situation. To her relief, Mia jumped at the opportunity. "Are you kidding? This is huge," Mia said excitedly over the phone. "Count me in. Just tell me what you need me to do." With Mia on board, Victoria felt a renewed sense of purpose. Over the next few days, she worked tirelessly to prepare for her return to the gallery. Marcus helped her assemble a wardrobe for Ava Carter, stylish yet understated outfits that screamed old money. They practiced her accent until it sounded natural, and Victoria memorized every detail of Ava's fabricated backstory. By the time she was ready to step back into the world of Lumina Arts Gallery, she felt confident that no one would suspect a thing. On the day of her second visit, Victoria stood in front of the mirror in her apartment, studying her transformation. Her dark hair was tucked neatly under a blonde wig, and her makeup was lighter, giving her features a softer, more delicate appearance. Dressed in a tailored beige coat and designer sunglasses, she barely recognized herself. For a moment, she felt a pang of guilt. Was this really necessary? Did she have to hide who she was to prove her point? But then she remembered Greg's smug face, Rachel's mocking whispers, and Ryan's dismissive tone. Yes, she thought firmly, this was necessary. Not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel small or unworthy because of the color of their skin. Taking a deep breath, Victoria grabbed her purse and headed out the door. When she arrived at the gallery, she slipped effortlessly into the role of Ava Carter. The staff greeted her warmly, their attitudes a stark contrast to how they had treated Victoria just weeks earlier. Greg himself approached her with a wide smile, eager to assist the mysterious heiress who had shown such interest in their collection. "I'm so glad you could join us today, Miss Carter," Greg said, his voice dripping with charm. "Is there anything specific you'd like to see?" Victoria tilted her head slightly, adopting Ava's refined demeanor. "Actually, yes. I heard you have some exquisite pieces here. Perhaps you could guide me through the highlights." As Greg led her around the gallery, Victoria couldn't help but marvel at the irony. Here she was, the same person they had insulted and dismissed, now receiving VIP treatment simply because of a disguise. It was infuriating but also empowering. Every smile, every compliment only strengthened her resolve to expose the truth. By the end of the visit, Victoria had gathered valuable information about the gallery's inner workings. She learned which artists were favored, almost exclusively, white men, and which ones were ignored, mostly women and minorities. She also noticed how the staff interacted differently with various clients, catering to those they deemed important while brushing off others. Back at home that night, Victoria reviewed her notes with Mia, who had discreetly recorded parts of the visit. Together, they began piecing together the evidence they would need to bring Lumina Arts Gallery to justice. It was a daunting task, but Victoria felt a surge of hope. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to imagine a future where galleries like this one were held accountable for their actions, where art truly belonged to everyone, regardless of race, gender, or background. As she climbed into bed that night, Victoria closed her eyes and pictured the ripple effect her actions could have. One gallery might not change the entire art world overnight, but it was a start. And sometimes she thought a single drop was all it took to create a wave. The next morning, Victoria woke up feeling energized. She had spent the night thinking about her plan, running through every detail in her mind. The sting of being disrespected at Lumina Arts Gallery still lingered, but it was overshadowed by a growing sense of purpose. This wasn't just about revenge or proving a point anymore. It was about exposing the truth and making sure no one else had to endure what she had gone through. After a quick breakfast, she called Mia to check in. "How's everything on your end?" Victoria asked as soon as Mia picked up. "I've been going through the recordings from yesterday," Mia replied. "It's pretty damning stuff. The way they fawn over Ava, compared to how they treated you, is insane. I'm editing some clips now so we can use them later." "Good," Victoria said, nodding even though Mia couldn't see her. "We'll need those ready for when we make our move. But there's more we have to do. We can't just rely on my undercover visits. We need to dig deeper." "What do you mean?" Mia asked curiously. "I mean, we need to talk to other people who've dealt with this gallery. Former employees, clients, anyone who might have experienced their discrimination firsthand. If we can get enough stories, it'll strengthen our case." Mia hesitated for a moment before responding. "That's a great idea, but it won't be easy. People might not want to speak out, especially if they're worried about retaliation." "I know," Victoria admitted. "But that's why we'll approach them carefully, offer anonymity if they need it, and remind them that speaking up could Help stop this kind of behavior from happening again. All right, Mia said, sounding more confident. I'll start reaching out to people today. Let's see what we can uncover. Over the next few days, Mia worked tirelessly to track down former employees and clients of Lumina Arts Gallery. At first, many were hesitant to share their experiences. Some feared legal repercussions, while others simply didn't want to relive painful memories. But as Mia explained the bigger picture, that this was about holding the gallery accountable and creating change, more people began opening up. One of the most revealing conversations came from Daniel, a former junior curator, who had left the gallery 6 months earlier. When Mia contacted him, he agreed to meet at a quiet cafe near his apartment. He arrived looking nervous, glancing around the room as if expecting someone to overhear their conversation. "Thanks for meeting me," Mia said warmly, offering him a reassuring smile. "I know this isn't easy, but your story could really help us." Daniel nodded, his hands wrapped tightly around a cup of coffee. I don't want to cause trouble, you know? But yeah, there were definitely things that bothered me when I worked there." "Like what?" Mia prompted gently. "Well, for starters, they had a very specific type of client they wanted to attract," Daniel began. "You know, rich white folks who fit their image of what an art collector should look like. Anyone outside that box was treated differently. Sometimes it was subtle, like ignoring questions or rushing them out of the gallery. Other times it was blatant, like refusing to show certain pieces to people of color because they assumed they wouldn't understand them." Mia scribbled notes furiously, her heart sinking as Daniel continued. "And then there were the artists," he added. "They actively discouraged showcasing works by minority artists. Ryan, the manager, used to say things like, 'Our traditional clientele prefers European styles.' It was code for keeping diversity out of the gallery." "That's disgusting," Mia muttered under her breath. "Did anyone ever push back against it?" "Not really," Daniel said with a shrug. "If you did, you didn't last long. I tried once advocating for a black artist whose work I thought was incredible. Ryan shot me down immediately and told me to focus on finding safer options. After that, I realized I couldn't stay there. It felt wrong to be part of something so exclusionary." By the time their conversation ended, Mia had pages of detailed notes. She thanked Daniel for his honesty and promised to keep his identity confidential unless he gave permission otherwise. As she walked home, she felt a mix of anger and determination. The more she learned, the clearer it became that Lumina Arts Gallery wasn't just guilty of isolated incidents of racism, it was built on a foundation of systemic discrimination. Meanwhile, Victoria continued her visits to the gallery as Ava Carter. Each trip provided new insights into the gallery's inner workings. During one visit, she struck up a casual conversation with Rachel, the same employee who had mocked her clothing during her first trip. Now, however, Rachel was all smiles, eager to impress the wealthy heiress. "You must travel a lot," Rachel said as she guided Victoria through a private collection. "Your taste in art seems so worldly." "Oh yes," Victoria replied in Ava's polished accent. "I spend quite a bit of time in Europe. There's nothing like experiencing art in its original context, don't you think?" Rachel nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. Though we try to bring that same level of sophistication here, of course." Victoria resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Instead, she smiled sweetly. "Of course. Speaking of which, I noticed you rarely feature artists of color in your exhibitions. Is that intentional?" Rachel faltered for a split second, caught off guard by the question. "Well, it's not about race or anything like that. It's just, well, some styles resonate better with our audience, you know?" Victoria tilted her head slightly, feigning curiosity. "Interesting. I suppose that makes sense, though I do find diverse perspectives incredibly enriching. Perhaps you should consider broadening your scope. It might attract a wider range of collectors." Rachel forced a laugh, clearly uncomfortable. "That's a good suggestion. I'll mention it to Ryan." As Victoria walked away, she made a mental note of Rachel's reaction. Every interaction like this brought her closer to unraveling the gallery's hypocrisy. By the end of the week, She had gathered enough material to paint a damning picture of their practices. Back at her apartment, Victoria and Mia reviewed everything they had collected so far. Between the audio recordings, written accounts from former employees, and Victoria's own observations, they had a mountain of evidence. Mia compiled it all into a folder, organizing each piece meticulously. "This is huge," Mia said, leaning back in her chair. "If we present this correctly, it could blow the whole thing wide open." Victoria nodded, her expression serious. "We need to figure out the best way to reveal it. A public expose would be powerful, but we have to time it right. Maybe during one of their big events when everyone's watching." "That's a great idea," Mia agreed. "Their upcoming gala is in 2 weeks. It's the perfect opportunity to confront them directly." "Exactly," Victoria said, a determined glint in her eye. "Let's make sure we're ready. This isn't just about taking down one gallery. It's about sending a message to the entire art world. They can't keep treating people like this and expect to get away with it." Over the next several days, Victoria and Mia fine-tuned their plan. They rehearsed what Victoria would say during the gala, ensuring she had all the facts straight. They also reached out to a few trusted journalists who promised to amplify the story once it broke. Everything was falling into place. As the date of the gala approached, Victoria felt a mix of nerves and excitement. She knew the stakes were high, but she also knew she couldn't back down now. For too long, places like Lumina Arts Gallery had operated under a veil of elitism and exclusion. It was time to rip that veil away and expose the ugliness beneath. On the morning of the gala, Victoria stood in front of her mirror once again, this time dressed in the same navy blue suit she had worn during her first visit to the gallery. It was symbolic, a reminder of where this journey had begun. As she adjusted her cuffs and smoothed her hair, she whispered to herself, "This is for everyone who's ever been made to feel unworthy. Tonight, we take a stand." With that, she grabbed her bag and headed out the door, ready to face whatever came next. The night of the gala arrived, and the streets outside Lumina Arts Gallery were lined with sleek black cars pulling up to the entrance. The gallery had spared no expense for this event, its annual showcase of elite artists and collectors, and the building glowed under golden lights. Inside, the space was transformed into a glittering wonderland, with crystal chandeliers casting soft light over expensive artworks and impeccably dressed guests mingling with champagne flutes in hand. Victoria stood just outside the doors, her heart pounding as she adjusted her navy blue suit one last time. She had chosen this moment carefully, knowing it would be the perfect opportunity to expose the gallery's hypocrisy. Tonight wasn't just about her. It was about every artist and client who had been dismissed, ignored, or insulted because they didn't fit the gallery's narrow definition of worthy. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. As soon as she entered, Victoria felt the familiar weight of judgmental stares. Some guests glanced at her curiously, while others barely acknowledged her presence. It was clear that most people here assumed she didn't belong, but Victoria didn't care. She had come prepared, carrying a small bag containing everything she needed to make her point. For now, though, she blended into the crowd, moving quietly through the room as if she were just another attendee. Greg spotted her almost immediately and approached with a polite but guarded smile. "Good evening," he said, his tone formal. "Is there anything I can assist you with?" Victoria met his gaze calmly. "No, thank you, I'm just enjoying the art." Greg hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. He recognized her from her first visit, but couldn't quite place why she looked familiar. Before he could say anything else, Ryan, the gallery manager, appeared at his side. "Everything all right here?" Ryan asked, his voice smooth and polished. "Yes, sir?" Greg replied quickly. "Just making sure our guest feels welcome." Ryan turned his attention to Victoria, offering a practiced smile. "Welcome to Lumina Arts Gallery. We're thrilled to have you join us tonight." Victoria nodded, politely, but said nothing. Instead, she let her eyes wander around the room, taking in the scene. The contrast between the gallery's polished exterior and its ugly truth was stark. As she moved further into the space, she noticed Rachel nearby, chatting animatedly with a group of clients. When Rachel caught sight of Victoria, her smile faltered slightly. though she quickly masked it with indifference. Mia was stationed near the back of the gallery, discreetly filming the event with a small camera hidden in her clutch. Earlier that day, they had agreed on signals to coordinate their actions. If Victoria gave a subtle nod toward the stage, Mia would begin recording openly, capturing everything for the world to see. Victoria kept this plan in mind as she navigated the crowd, waiting for the right moment to strike. The gala reached its climax when Ryan took the stage to deliver his opening speech. Guests clinked their glasses together and settled into their seats, eager to hear what he had to say. Ryan began by thanking the sponsors and patrons who made the event possible. His words dripping with charm and charisma, he spoke about the importance of art in bridging cultures and fostering understanding, earning polite applause from the audience. Victoria listened intently, her jaw tightening as Ryan painted the gallery as a beacon of inclusivity and creativity. Every word felt like a slap in the face given what she knew about their discriminatory practices. When Ryan paused to sip water, Victoria saw her chance. Rising from her seat, she walked steadily toward the stage, ignoring the curious glances of those around her. Reaching the edge of the platform, she cleared her throat loudly enough to draw everyone's attention. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Ryan stared down at her, confusion flickering across his face. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone sharp. Victoria smiled faintly, her expression calm but unyielding. "Yes, actually. I'd like to say a few words." Before Ryan could object, she stepped onto the stage, positioning herself behind the microphone. A murmur rippled through the audience, but Victoria ignored it, focusing instead on the task ahead. She pulled a USB drive from her pocket and handed it to the technician operating the projector. "Play this," she instructed firmly. The screen behind her lit up, displaying the first image, a photograph of Greg sneering at her during her initial visit. The caption read, "This isn't really your style, ma'am. Maybe we can find something simpler?" Gasps echoed through the room as guests leaned forward, trying to understand what was happening. One by one, more images and recordings appeared on the screen. There was footage of Rachel mocking Victoria's clothing to her co-worker, audio clips of Ryan dismissing her interest in art, and emails revealing the gallery's deliberate exclusion of minority artists. Each piece of evidence painted a damning picture of systemic racism and elitism. Ryan's face turned pale as he realized what was unfolding. "What is this?" he demanded, stepping closer to the stage. "This," Victoria said, her voice steady and strong, "is the truth about Lumina Arts Gallery. This is how you treat people who don't look like you, who don't fit your idea of what an art collector should be. You claim to celebrate diversity, yet you actively suppress it. And I'm not the only one who's experienced your discrimination." She gestured toward the screen, where testimonies from former employees and clients began scrolling. Daniel's story appeared next, followed by accounts from other victims who had shared their experiences with Mia. The audience sat in stunned silence, some visibly uncomfortable, others whispering among themselves. Rachel tried to slip out of the room unnoticed, but Victoria called her out. "Don't bother leaving, Rachel. Your comments about my outfit are already on record." The blonde woman froze, her cheeks flushing red as several guests turned to glare at her. Ryan attempted to regain control, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "Ladies and gentlemen, please. This is clearly a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Victoria interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "No, Mr. Ryan. This is years of prejudice and exclusion masquerading as sophistication. You've built this gallery on lies, and tonight, the world will know exactly who you are." The final slide appeared on the screen, a collage of all the evidence they had gathered, accompanied by the words, "Art belongs to everyone." The room erupted into murmurs, with some guests standing up to leave while others applauded Victoria's courage. After the presentation ended, chaos ensued. Reporters who had been tipped off by Mia swarmed the gallery, bombarding Ryan and his staff with questions. Sponsors and donors began pulling out, horrified by the revelations. By the end of the night, Lumina Arts Gallery's reputation was in tatters. Victoria stepped off the stage, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. Mia rushed over, her camera still running. "You did it," she said, grinning widely. "You really did it." Victoria nodded, allowing herself a small smile. "We did it. Together." As they left the gallery, Victoria glanced back one last time. The once glamorous facade now seemed hollow, stripped of its pretense. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be backlash, lawsuits, and attempts to discredit her. But she also knew she had struck a blow against injustice. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of peace. Walking into the cool night air, Victoria felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She didn't do this for revenge or recognition. She did it because it was the right thing to do. And as she climbed into a cab with Mia beside her, she whispered softly, "Let's go home." The city lights blurred past the windows as the vehicle sped through the streets. Victoria leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a moment. The battle wasn't over, but tonight she had won a crucial victory. Art belonged to everyone, and she intended to make sure the world never forgot that. The morning after the gala, Victoria woke up to a flood of notifications on her phone. News outlets had picked up the story overnight, and it was everywhere. Social media, television, newspapers. The headlines screamed variations of the same theme. Elite gallery exposed for systemic racism. Art world shaken by discrimination scandal. And black millionaire calls out hypocrisy at Lumina Arts Gallery. Victoria scrolled through the articles as she sipped her coffee, her lips curving into a faint smile. The gallery's downfall had been swift and public, just as she had hoped. Sponsors who had once praised Lumina Arts were now distancing themselves, issuing statements condemning racism and promising to support more inclusive initiatives in the future. Artists whose works had been rejected by the gallery were speaking out, sharing their own stories of rejection and humiliation. But with the victory came backlash. Some people accused Victoria of being too harsh, claiming that exposing the gallery publicly was unnecessary and damaging to the art community. Others defended Ryan and his staff, arguing that what happened was simply a misunderstanding or an isolated incident. Comment sections across social media were filled with heated debates, some supporting Victoria's actions and others attacking her motives. Despite the criticism, Victoria remained focused. She knew this reaction was inevitable. Change rarely came without resistance, and she was prepared to face it head-on. As she set her phone aside, Marcus called. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice warm but concerned. "I'm fine," Victoria replied honestly. "It's exhausting, but I expected it. People don't like being forced to confront uncomfortable truths." "You did the right thing," Marcus said firmly. "And if anyone tries to sue or retaliate, we'll handle it. You've got me, and everyone else who supports you behind you." "Thank you," Victoria said softly, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. Having allies like Marcus made all the difference. But there's still more work to do. This isn't just about one gallery. It's about changing the entire system. Later that day, Victoria met with Mia at a quiet cafe near her apartment. They sat in a corner booth, away from prying ears, reviewing the aftermath of the gala. Mia had spent hours compiling reactions from the art world and tracking how far the story had spread. "It's blowing up online," Mia said, showing Victoria screenshots of posts from artists, critics, and even celebrities weighing in on the scandal. "A lot of people are praising you for standing up to them. But there's also pushback, like you said." Victoria nodded, unsurprised. "That's how it always is. People cling to the status quo because it's easier than admitting they're part of the problem. But we can use this momentum to create real change." Mia leaned forward, her eyes lighting up. "What do you mean?" Victoria took a deep breath, her mind already racing with ideas. "I want to start a new initiative, an organization dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion in the art world. Something that gives underrepresented artists a platform and ensures galleries can't get away with exclusionary practices anymore." "That's amazing," Mia said, her voice filled with admiration. "Do you have a name for it yet?" Victoria smiled, pulling out a notebook where she had jotted down thoughts over the past few days. I've been thinking about calling it Art Without Borders. It's simple, but it says everything I want it to say. That art should be accessible to everyone regardless of race, gender, or background. Mia grinned. I love it. So what's the first step? We need funding, Victoria replied. I'll put up the initial investment myself, but we'll also reach out to sponsors who believe in our mission. Once we have the resources, we can start organizing exhibitions, workshops, and mentorship programs for emerging artists. And I'll help however I can, Mia added quickly. Whether it's writing press releases, documenting events, or connecting you with journalists, I'm in. Thanks, Mia, Victoria said, touched by her friend's enthusiasm. This isn't going to be easy, but together we can make it happen. Over the next few weeks, Victoria threw herself into building Art Without Borders. She reached out to artists whose careers had been stifled by discrimination, inviting them to showcase their work in upcoming exhibitions. She partnered with schools and community centers to offer free art classes to children from underserved neighborhoods. Word spread quickly, and soon, volunteers began reaching out, eager to contribute to the cause. One afternoon, Victoria received an unexpected call from Daniel, the former curator who had shared his story during the investigation. He sounded nervous but hopeful. Hi, Ms. Monroe, he began. I heard about your new project and I wanted to say thank you. What you're doing, it's exactly what the art world needs. Victoria smiled warmly. Thank you for saying that, Daniel. Your courage in coming forward meant a lot to me. Are you interested in getting involved? Yes, Daniel replied without hesitation. If you'll have me, I'd love to help. I've seen firsthand how broken the system is and I want to be part of fixing it. Welcome aboard, Victoria said, feeling a surge of pride. With each new ally, the movement grew stronger. As Art Without Borders gained traction, so did the pressure on Lumina Arts Gallery. Lawsuits were filed against the gallery by former employees and clients who felt wronged. Ryan resigned in disgrace, unable to salvage his reputation. Greg and Rachel disappeared from the art scene altogether, their careers tarnished beyond repair. Through it all, Victoria stayed grounded. She attended meetings, gave interviews, and worked tirelessly to ensure her initiative succeeded. But she also took time to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. The insults and dismissals she had endured at Lumina Arts Gallery had been painful, but they had also fueled her determination to fight for justice. Now she saw those experiences not as moments of weakness, but as catalysts for change. One evening, as she walked through the streets of New York City, Victoria stopped in front of a mural painted on the side of a building. It depicted a diverse group of people holding hands surrounded by vibrant colors and symbols of unity. Someone had scrawled the words, "Art belongs to everyone," beneath it, a phrase she recognized instantly. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized the impact of what she had started. This wasn't just about exposing one gallery or launching one initiative. It was about inspiring others to challenge inequality wherever they found it. Art had always been a source of joy and healing for Victoria, and now she was using it to heal others. As she stood there, a young woman approached her hesitantly. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice trembling slightly. "Are you Victoria Monroe?" "Yes," Victoria replied, turning to face her. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman continued, her eyes shining with emotion. "Your story gave me hope. I've always loved art, but I never thought someone like me could belong in that world. Seeing what you've done, it makes me believe anything is possible." Victoria felt her throat tighten as she fought back. Tears. "You absolutely belong," she said firmly. "Never let anyone tell you otherwise." The woman smiled gratefully before walking away, leaving Victoria alone with her thoughts. In that moment, she knew her work was far from over. But she also knew it was worth every struggle, every sleepless night, and every ounce of energy she poured into it. With renewed resolve, Victoria turned and headed home, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The road to equality was long, but she was determined to walk it, one step at a time. Months passed, and Art Without Borders grew into something bigger than Victoria had ever imagined. What began as a small initiative to combat discrimination in the art world quickly blossomed into a movement that inspired change across industries. Artists from all walks of life, Black, brown, Indigenous, Asian, women, LGBTQ+, disabled, and more, found a home within the organization. Galleries that had once turned them away now reached out, eager to collaborate with Art Without Borders and prove their commitment to inclusivity. The first major exhibition organized by the initiative took place in a sprawling warehouse-turned-gallery in Brooklyn. The space was transformed into a vibrant celebration of diversity, with paintings, sculptures, photographs, and installations filling every corner. Each piece told a story, reflecting the unique experiences and perspectives of its creator. The event drew thousands of visitors, including collectors, critics, and curious locals who wanted to see what everyone was talking about. Victoria stood near the entrance on opening night, watching as people moved through the gallery, their faces lighting up with awe and appreciation. She wore a simple black dress, her usual confidence tempered by a quiet sense of pride. This wasn't just an exhibition, it was proof that art could transcend barriers and bring people together. Mia approached her, holding a clipboard and grinning ear to ear. "This is incredible," she said, gesturing to the bustling crowd. "I've never seen anything like it." Victoria nodded, her eyes scanning the room. "It's amazing, isn't it? Seeing so many people connect with these works. It reminds me why we started this in the first place." "You deserve all the credit," Mia replied. "You turned your pain into something beautiful." Victoria shook her head slightly. "Not me alone. Everyone here played a part. The artists, the volunteers, you. We did this together." As the evening went on, Victoria found herself surrounded by admirers and supporters. Some thanked her for giving underrepresented voices a platform, while others shared how her actions had inspired them to challenge inequality in their own lives. One young girl, no older than 10, tugged at her sleeve shyly. "Are you the lady? Who made this happen?" the girl asked, pointing to a colorful mural nearby. "I helped," Victoria said with a smile. "But the real magic comes from the artists who created these pieces. Do you like art?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "I want to be an artist when I grow up." "Well then, keep drawing," Victoria encouraged. "And remember, there's always a place for your voice in the world." Later that week, Victoria attended a panel discussion hosted by a prominent arts foundation. The topic was redefining inclusion in the art world, and she was invited to speak alongside other advocates for change. As she sat on stage, listening to the other speakers share their insights, Victoria felt a deep sense of gratitude. Just a year ago, she had been fighting against racism and exclusion alone. Now she was part of a growing community determined to reshape the future of art. When it was her turn to speak, Victoria leaned forward, her voice steady and clear. For too long, the art world has been controlled by a narrow definition of what is valuable or worthy. But art is not about fitting into someone else's mold. It's about expressing yourself authentically. That's why initiatives like Art Without Borders are so important. They remind us that creativity knows no boundaries, and neither should opportunity. Her words earned a standing ovation, but Victoria didn't stay to bask in the applause. After the event ended, she slipped out quietly, heading back to her apartment. She needed time to process everything that had happened, the victories, the challenges, and the lessons learned along the way. Back home, Victoria sat on her couch, staring out at the city skyline. The lights twinkled like stars, a reminder of how far she had come. From the moment she walked into Lumina Arts Gallery and faced Greg's condescension, to the night she exposed their hypocrisy, to the creation of Art Without Borders, her journey had been one of resilience and purpose. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was Marcus, checking in as he often did. "How's it going?" he asked when she answered. "Good," Victoria replied. "Tired, but good. Today's panel reminded me how much work still needs to be done. And you're leading the charge," Marcus said proudly. "You've already changed so much, Victoria. Don't forget to take care of yourself, too." "I will," she promised. "Thanks for always having my back." After hanging up, Victoria reflected on his words. He was right. She couldn't pour from an empty cup. For months, she had poured every ounce of energy into building Art Without Borders, driven by a desire to make a difference. But now she realized it was okay to slow down. The movement would continue without her needing to micromanage every detail. Others were stepping up, taking ownership of the vision she had started. A few days later, Victoria decided to visit one of the community centers where Art Without Borders offered free art classes. She arrived unannounced, wanting to observe without drawing attention to herself. Inside, children laughed and painted freely, their canvases splashed with bold colors and imaginative designs. Volunteers moved between tables, offering guidance and encouragement. In the corner, a teenage boy sat hunched over his sketchbook, furiously scribbling lines and shapes. His brow was furrowed in concentration, and he didn't notice Victoria until she knelt beside him. "That's incredible," she said softly, gesturing to his drawing. "What are you working on?" The boy looked up, startled, then relaxed when he recognized her. "Oh, hi, Ms. Monroe. I'm trying to draw my neighborhood the way I see it, not the way people talk about it." Victoria smiled. "That sounds powerful. Keep going. Your perspective matters." As she left the center, Victoria felt a renewed sense of hope. These kids were the future, not just of art, but of the world. By giving them tools and opportunities, Art Without Borders was planting seeds that would grow into something extraordinary. Weeks turned into months, and Victoria continued balancing her personal life with her role as the face of Art Without Borders. She traveled to cities across the country, speaking at conferences and meeting with local leaders to expand the initiative. Along the way, she met countless individuals whose lives had been touched by the movement. Each story reinforced her belief that art had the power to heal, unite, and transform. One evening, as she prepared for bed, Victoria picked up a framed photograph from her bedside table. It was taken at the inaugural Art Without Borders exhibition, capturing the joy and excitement of that night. In the photo, she stood surrounded by artists and supporters, their smiles radiant and genuine. Setting the frame back down, Victoria climbed into bed and closed her eyes. Her mind drifted to the mural she had seen months earlier, the one with the words, "Art belongs to everyone." Those 4 words summed up everything she had fought for. They were a reminder that art wasn't just for the elite or the privileged. It was for anyone willing to dream, create, and share their truth. As sleep claimed her, Victoria felt a deep sense of peace. The battle wasn't over. There would always be obstacles to overcome, but she knew she had sparked a revolution. And revolutions, no matter how small they began, had the power to change the world.